I never thought an envelope could make my stomach churn, but there it was, sitting innocently on our kitchen counter. The moment I saw the ornate gold lettering and the embossed floral design, I knew it was from Cynthia, my mother-in-law. My husband, Daniel, had already opened it, leaving it there for me to find like a landmine in our otherwise peaceful home. "Sophia," Daniel called from the living room, his voice light and carefree. "Mom's hosting another charity gala. We're invited." I picked up the invitation, my fingers tracing the edges of the thick cardstock. The date was set for next month, giving me plenty of time to come up with excuses not to go. But I knew better. In Cynthia's world, an invitation wasn't just an invitation, it was a summons. "Sounds great," I lied, forcing a smile even though Daniel couldn't see me. "I'll check my schedule." He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that charming grin of his. "Come on, babe. It'll be fun. You never know, Mom might surprise you this time." I almost laughed at that. Cynthia surprising me? Sure, maybe by finding new ways to remind me how I didn't belong in her world of country clubs and charity auctions. "I don't know, Dan," I said, turning away to busy myself with the dishes in the sink. "I've got that big order to finish up. You know how important my work is to me." Daniel crossed the kitchen, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "Your little clay figures can wait, can't they? This is for a good cause." I bristled at his words but didn't pull away. My little clay figures were more than just a hobby, they were my passion, my art. Each sculpture I created was a piece of my soul, shaped by my hands and brought to life through hours of dedication. But to Daniel, and especially to Cynthia, they were just trinkets, a cute little pastime for a housewife with too much time on her hands. "They're sculptures, Dan," I corrected him gently. "And they're not just for fun. People buy them. They mean something to people." He kissed the top of my head, a gesture that used to make me feel loved but now felt almost patronizing. I know. You're very talented. But this gala is important to Mom. She's raising money for the children's hospital. Don't you want to support that?" And there it was, the guilt trip. How could I say no to sick children? Cynthia knew exactly what she was doing when she chose her causes. It made it impossible for anyone to refuse her invitations without looking like a heartless monster. I sighed, drying my hands on a dish towel. "All right, I'll go. But promise me you'll stay by my side the whole time?" Daniel's face lit up. "Of course. It'll be great, you'll see. We'll have a wonderful evening out, rub elbows with some of Boston's finest, and maybe even make some connections for your art." I doubted that last part. The type of people who attended Cynthia's galas weren't exactly in the market for handcrafted clay sculptures. They were more into big names, expensive paintings, and sculptures that cost more than our house. But I nodded anyway, not wanting to dampen Daniel's enthusiasm. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into my work, using it as both a distraction and a form of therapy. My workshop, a converted garage at the back of our modest colonial house, became my sanctuary. The smell of clay and the feel of it beneath my fingers grounded me, helping me forget about the looming gala and all the anxiety that came with it. I was in the middle of finishing a particularly intricate piece, a delicate tree with individually sculpted leaves, when Daniel knocked on the door. "Sophia? Can I come in?" I called out a yes, not taking my eyes off my work. He entered, careful not to disturb anything as he made his way to my workbench. "Wow," he said, genuinely impressed. "That's beautiful, babe. Is it for Mrs. Henderson?" I nodded, adding another tiny leaf to a branch. She wanted something to remember her late husband by. He proposed to her under an oak tree in their backyard. Daniel watched me work for a moment, and I could feel the tension building in the air. I knew what was coming before he even opened his mouth. "Listen, about the gala." I set down my tools, finally looking up at him. "What about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since college. "Mom called. She wants us to come over early to help set up. And she was hoping you might wear that dress she bought you for Christmas." The dress? Of course. A designer piece that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, chosen specifically to make me look like I belonged in Cynthia's world. It was beautiful, I had to admit, but it wasn't me. It was what Cynthia wanted me to be. Dan, I started, but he cut me off. I know. It's not your style. But it would mean a lot to her. And to me. Please. I looked at him, really looked at him. His hopeful expression, the way he was almost bouncing on his toes like an excited kid. How had we gotten here? When had I become the difficult one, always needing to be coaxed and cajoled into fitting into his family's expectations? Okay, I found myself saying, even as a part of me screamed in protest. I'll wear the dress. The day of the gala arrived, and I found myself standing in front of our bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. The dress, a sleek black number with a plunging neckline, hugged my curves in a way that made me feel both beautiful and exposed. My normally wild curls had been tamed into an elegant updo, and makeup I rarely wore accentuated my features. Daniel whistled as he came into the room, already dressed in his tuxedo. You look amazing, Sophia. Mom's going to be thrilled. I forced a smile, smoothing down the front of the dress. Thanks. You look handsome too. As we drove to Cynthia's sprawling estate in Beacon Hill, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading into battle rather than a charity event. The closer we got, the tighter my chest felt, my breathing becoming shallow. Daniel must have noticed my discomfort because he reached over and squeezed my hand. Relax, babe. It's just a party. You'll be fine. But it wasn't just a party. It was a test, another chance for Cynthia to scrutinize me, to find all the ways I didn't measure up to her standards. And deep down, I knew I was walking into a trap. I just didn't know how painful the snare would be. As we pulled up to the grand house, valets rushing to open our doors, I took a deep breath. This was it. Time to step into Cynthia's world and hope I could make it through the night with my dignity intact. Little did I know, dignity was a luxury I wouldn't be afforded for long. As we stepped into Cynthia's grand foyer, I felt like I was entering another world. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and freshly cut flowers. Guests in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits milled about, their laughter and chatter creating a constant buzz of noise. Cynthia swooped down on us almost immediately, her silver hair coiffed to perfection and her diamond earrings catching the light as she moved. Daniel, darling, she exclaimed, air-kissing both of his cheeks before turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And Sophia, how nice of you to come. I forced a smile, accepting her air-kiss and trying not to flinch at the way her eyes raked over me, no doubt cataloguing every flaw and imperfection. Thank you for inviting us, Cynthia. The house looks beautiful. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, this old place. We make do. Now, Daniel, there are some people you simply must meet. The Andersons are here, and their son just made partner at his law firm. Before I could blink, Cynthia had whisked Daniel away, leaving me standing alone in a sea of strangers. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I could do this. It was just one night, after all. I made my way to the bar, figuring a glass of wine might help calm my nerves. As I waited for the bartender to pour my drink, I overheard snippets of conversation around me. Did you see what she's wearing? Clearly off the rack. I heard she makes little clay dolls or something. Can you imagine? Daniel could do so much better. I don't know what he sees in her. I grabbed my wine, taking a large gulp and willing myself not to react. These people didn't know me. Their opinions shouldn't matter. But each whispered comment felt like a tiny needle, pricking at my self-confidence. I spotted Daniel across the room, deep in conversation with a group of men in expensive suits. He caught my eye and waved, motioning for me to join him. As I made my way over, I couldn't help but notice how at ease he looked, how naturally he fit into this world of wealth and privilege. There you are, he said, wrapping an arm around my waist as I reached him. Gentlemen, this is my wife, Sophia. Sophia, meet Mr. Anderson, Mr. Blackwell, and Dr. Rothschild. I shook hands with each of them, trying to ignore the way their eyes seemed to look through me rather than at me. It's nice to meet you all, I said, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. So, Sophia, Mr. Anderson said, swirling his scotch. Daniel tells us you're quite the artist. What exactly is it that you do? I felt a flutter of excitement at the chance to talk about my work. I create custom clay sculptures, I explained, warming to the topic. Each piece is handcrafted and unique, often commissioned for special occasions or as memorial pieces. Dr. Rothschild raised an eyebrow. Clay sculptures? How quaint. And this is your full-time occupation? The excitement drained away, replaced by a familiar sense of inadequacy. Yes, it is. I have a growing online business and how fascinating, Mr. Blackwell interrupted, clearly not fascinated at all. Daniel, tell us more about that merger your firm is working on. Now that's real work, isn't it? And just like that, I was dismissed. Daniel launched into a discussion about corporate law, while I stood there feeling invisible. I excused myself, though I doubted anyone noticed, and made my way out to the terrace for some fresh air. The night air was cool against my skin, a welcome relief from the stuffiness inside. I leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over Cynthia's meticulously manicured gardens. In the distance, I could see the lights of downtown Boston twinkling like stars. It's quite a view, isn't it? I turned to find a woman standing next to me, a kind smile on her face. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. It's beautiful, I agreed. I'm Sophia, Daniel's wife. Ah, yes. I've heard about you. I'm Margaret, by the way. Cynthia and I go way back. She paused, studying me for a moment. You don't really want to be here, do you? I was taken aback by her directness. It's for a good cause, I stammered. Margaret laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Oh, honey. We both know that's not why Cynthia throws these things. It's all about power and status. But don't let it get to you. These people, they're not half as important as they think they are. For the first time that evening, I felt myself relax a little. Thank you. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't belong here. Nonsense, Margaret said firmly. You belong wherever you choose to be. Now, tell me about this art of yours. I hear you make sculptures. For the next half hour, Margaret and I chatted about my work, her grandchildren, and her own passion for gardening. It was the most genuine conversation I'd had all night, and I found myself actually enjoying the gala for the first time. But all good things must come to an end. A hush fell over the crowd inside, and I could hear the tapping of a microphone. Margaret gave me a sympathetic pat on the arm. Looks like Cynthia's about to make her speech. We'd better head in. We made our way back into the ballroom just as Cynthia took center stage, resplendent in a shimmering gold gown. She smiled out at the crowd, champagne flute in hand, every inch the perfect hostess. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room. Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, we're here to support a cause very dear to my heart, the Boston Children's Hospital. She went on to talk about the hospital's work, peppered with anecdotes about her own involvement and thinly veiled brags about the amount of money she'd personally donated. I found myself zoning out, my eyes searching the crowd for Daniel. And speaking of success stories, Cynthia's voice cut through my thoughts, snapping me back to attention. I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone special. My daughter-in-law, Sophia. Sophia, dear, where are you? Ah, there you are. Come up here, won't you? I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't part of the plan. Daniel had never mentioned anything about me being singled out. With shaking legs, I made my way to the stage, acutely aware of every eye in the room on me. Cynthia put an arm around my shoulders, her grip just a little too tight to be comfortable. Sophia here is quite the entrepreneur, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She makes the most darling little clay figures. Isn't that right, dear? They're sculptures, I corrected quietly, but Cynthia spoke over me. You know, when Daniel first told me about Sophia's hobby, I was worried. After all, a man in his position needs a wife who can support his career, host dinner parties, be involved in the right charities. But Sophia here has shown us all that you can have it all. A loving wife, a successful husband, and a cute little side business making knickknacks. The room erupted in laughter, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. This wasn't recognition, it was a public takedown. I mean, who needs a real job when you can play with clay all day, right? Cynthia continued, her smile never wavering. It's just adorable how she thinks she's a real artist. But that's what I love about you, Sophia. You're so quaint. I searched the crowd desperately for Daniel, silently begging him to put a stop to this. When I finally spotted him, my heart sank. He was laughing along with everyone else, raising his glass in a mock toast. To Sophia, Cynthia said, raising her own glass. May your little clay dolls bring you as much joy as they bring us amusement. The room echoed with to Sophia, followed by more laughter. I stood there, frozen, as Cynthia finally released me and shooed me off the stage. I stumbled back into the crowd, my vision blurring with unshed tears. As soon as I could, I fled the ballroom, finding refuge in a small powder room. I locked the door behind me, finally allowing the tears to fall. My reflection in the mirror was a mess, mascara running down my cheeks, my carefully styled hair coming undone. A soft knock on the door made me jump. Sophia? It was Daniel. Are you okay? I wiped at my face, trying to compose myself. I'm fine, I called back, my voice shaky. I'll be out in a minute. Come on, babe. Mom was just joking around. Don't take it so seriously. His words were like a slap in the face. Joking around? Is that what he called public humiliation? I opened the door, facing my husband with newfound anger. Joking around? She just humiliated me in front of everyone, Daniel. And you laughed. He had the decency to look sheepish. I'm sorry, I didn't think no, you didn't think, I cut him off. You never do when it comes to your mother. I'm going home. Sophia, wait but I was already pushing past him, making my way to the coat check. I couldn't bear to spend another minute in this house, with these people who saw me as nothing more than a joke. As I stepped out into the night, I took a deep breath of the cool air. The tears had stopped, replaced by a burning sense of resolve. Something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly trying to fit into a world that didn't want me. I hailed a cab, giving the driver our address. As we pulled away from Cynthia's mansion, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I was done trying to be someone I wasn't. It was time to stand up for myself and my art. It was time to show Cynthia, Daniel, and the world exactly who Sophia really was. The cab ride home was a blur of streetlights and quiet sobs. I couldn't shake the image of Cynthia's smug face, or the sound of laughter echoing through the ballroom. Worst of all, I kept seeing Daniel's face, his eyes twinkling with amusement as his mother tore me down piece by piece. When we pulled up to our house, I fumbled with my clutch, my hands shaking as I tried to find cash for the fare. The driver, a kind-faced older man, waved me off. "It's on me, miss," he said softly. "Looks like you've had a rough night." I managed a weak smile, grateful for this small act of kindness from a stranger. "Thank you," I whispered, climbing out of the cab on unsteady legs. Our house, a modest colonial that had always felt like a warm, welcoming haven, now seemed cold and unwelcoming. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, not bothering to turn on the lights. In the darkness, I could pretend that everything was normal, that this was just another night coming home from a party. But it wasn't normal. Nothing about this night had been normal. I made my way to our bedroom, kicking off the uncomfortable heels Cynthia had insisted I wear. The dress, that beautiful, expensive prison of fabric, suddenly felt suffocating. I struggled with the zipper, my frustration growing until I finally yanked it down, not caring if I tore the delicate material. As the dress pulled at my feet, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror. My carefully applied makeup was a mess, mascara streaking down my cheeks. My hair, which had taken an hour to style, was coming undone, stray curls framing my face. I looked like a wreck, a poor little girl playing dress-up in clothes that were never meant for her. The tears came again, hot and angry this time. I sank to the floor, my back against the cool wood of our bed, and let myself cry. All the humiliation, the anger, the hurt, I let it all pour out, my body shaking with the force of my sobs. I don't know how long I sat there, crying in the dark. It could have been minutes or hours. But eventually, the tears subsided, leaving me feeling hollow and drained. As I sat there, trying to catch my breath, my eyes fell on my dresser. There, displayed proudly, was one of my first sculptures, a small, imperfect clay figurine of a woman with her arms stretched towards the sky. I'd made it years ago, when I was just starting to explore my passion for sculpting. I remembered the day I'd shown it to Daniel, how proud I'd been of my creation. He'd smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "That's nice, honey. Maybe you could make some for the craft fair at church." At the time, I'd been disappointed by his lackluster response, but I'd brushed it off. Now, looking at that little figure, I felt a spark of something new ignite in my chest. It wasn't a perfect sculpture by any means, but it was mine. I'd poured my heart and soul into it, just like I did with every piece I created. Slowly, I stood up, walking over to pick up the figurine. I cradled it in my hands, feeling its weight, tracing the lines and curves I'd so carefully crafted. This wasn't just a hobby or a cute little pastime. This was my art, my passion, my calling. Who was Cynthia to mock that? Who was Daniel to dismiss it? I set the figurine back down and wiped my face, a new determination settling over me. I wasn't going to let them define me or my worth any longer. It was time to stand up for myself and my art. With renewed energy, I changed into my most comfortable pajamas and made my way to my workshop. As I flicked on the lights, the familiar smell of clay and paint washed over me, instantly calming my frayed nerves. My current project, a series of interconnected tree sculptures, sat on my workbench. I'd been working on it for weeks, pouring all my skill and creativity into every branch and leaf. Cynthia had sneered when I'd mentioned it, asking if I was making fairy houses now. But looking at it now, I could see the beauty in it, the intricate details that told a story of growth and resilience. I sat down at my bench, picking up my tools with practiced ease. As I began to work, adding delicate leaves to one of the smaller trees, I felt the tension in my body start to melt away. Here, in my own space, surrounded by my creations, I was in control. Here, I was an artist. The hours slipped by unnoticed as I lost myself in my work. The sun was just beginning to peek through the windows when I finally set down my tools, surveying what I'd accomplished. The sculpture had evolved, growing more complex and beautiful with each passing hour. It wasn't just a tree anymore, it was a testament to my skill, my vision, my worth as an artist. As I cleaned up my workspace, my mind drifted back to the gala. The sting of Cynthia's words was still there, but it felt duller now, overshadowed by a growing sense of pride in my work. I thought about the guests at the party, with their expensive clothes and their judgmental stares. How many of them could create something like this? How many of them had the courage to pursue their passion, to put their heart and soul into something tangible? I made my way back to the house, my body tired but my mind clear. As I passed the living room, I noticed the blinking light on our answering machine. With a sigh, I pressed play, bracing myself for what I assumed would be a message from Daniel. But it wasn't Daniel's voice that filled the room. It was Margaret's, the kind woman I'd met at the gala. "Sophia, dear, it's Margaret. I hope you don't mind, I got your number from the guest list. I just wanted to check on you after what happened at the party. What Cynthia did was inexcusable, and I want you to know that not everyone shares her views. In fact, I was wondering if you might be interested in displaying some of your work at my gallery. I have a show coming up featuring local artists, and I think your sculptures would be a wonderful addition. Give me a call when you can. And Sophia, don't let them dim your light. Your art matters." I stood there, stunned, as the message ended. Margaret wanted to display my work. In a real gallery? A bubble of excitement rose in my chest, threatening to burst. This was an opportunity I'd only dreamed of, a chance to show the world what I could do. As the reality of Margaret's offer sank in, I felt a shift inside me. The hurt and humiliation from the gala were still there, but they were being overshadowed by something stronger: hope, determination, and a fierce pride in who I was and what I could create. I glanced at the clock, noting that it was still early. Daniel wouldn't be home for hours, probably sleeping off the previous night at his parents' house. Good. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled on our back porch, watching as the neighborhood came to life around me. As I sipped my coffee, I let my mind wander, imagining my sculptures on display in Margaret's gallery. I thought about the people who might see them, who might be moved by them. I thought about Cynthia's face if she ever walked into that gallery and saw my name on the wall. A small, satisfied smile crept onto my face. This was just the beginning. I had talent, I had passion, and now, thanks to Margaret, I had an opportunity. I wasn't going to waste it. As the morning wore on, I made a decision. I was done trying to fit into Cynthia's world. I was done letting Daniel dismiss my art as a cute hobby. It was time to focus on my work, to push myself further than I ever had before. The gallery show was my chance to prove to everyone, including myself, that I was a real artist, worthy of respect and recognition. With newfound energy, I headed back to my workshop. I had a lot of work to do if I was going to be ready for the show. As I picked up my tools once again, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever happened with Daniel, whatever Cynthia might say or do, I knew I had found my path. My art was my strength, my voice, my truth. And I was ready to let it speak for me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be more tears, more doubts, more struggles. But as I looked at the sculptures around me, each one a piece of my soul made tangible, I knew I was ready to face whatever came my way. Because now, finally, I understood my own worth. And no one, not Cynthia, not Daniel, not anyone, could take that away from me. The days following the gala blurred together in a haze of emotion and intense focus. I threw myself into my work, spending every waking moment in my workshop. Daniel had tried to talk to me when he finally came home the morning after the gala, but I'd shut him out, unable to deal with his half-hearted apologies and excuses. He'd given up after a while, retreating to his study to catch up on work. It was on the third day, as I was putting the finishing touches on a new piece for Margaret's gallery show, that my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, lost in the flow of creation, but something made me pause and check the screen. It was an email notification, the subject line catching my eye immediately: "Your art changed my life." Curious, I set down my tools and opened the message. As I read, my heart began to race, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Dear Sophia, my name is Alexander Sterling. You may not know me, but I've become intimately familiar with your work over the past few months. I stumbled across your online shop quite by accident, but from the moment I saw your sculptures, I was captivated. Your pieces speak to me in a way no other art has in years. The emotion, the raw humanity you capture in clay, it's extraordinary. I've been following your work closely, purchasing pieces when I can, but I feel compelled to reach out directly. I'm an art collector, and I believe your collection is worth far more than any price you've listed. I'd like to purchase every piece you currently have available, as well as commission an exclusive piece for my gallery. Please reach out to discuss the total value. I assure you, it will be more than fair. Your art has truly changed my life, Sophia. I hope we can work together to share your incredible talent with the world. Sincerely, Alexander Sterling." I read the email 3 times, hardly daring to believe it was real. Alexander Sterling, the name niggled at the back of my mind. Where had I heard it before? With trembling fingers, I did a quick internet search, and my jaw dropped. Alexander Sterling wasn't just any art collector. He was the art collector, known for his discerning eye and his ability to spot emerging talent before they hit the mainstream. His endorsement could make an artist's career overnight. And he wanted to buy all of my work. I sat down heavily on my work stool, my mind reeling. This was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. It was validation on a scale I couldn't have imagined, especially coming so soon after Cynthia's public humiliation. As the initial shock wore off, a bubble of laughter escaped me, growing until I was doubled over, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just laughter, it was relief, joy, vindication all rolled into one. When I finally caught my breath, I looked around my workshop with new eyes. Each sculpture, each piece I'd poured my heart and soul into, suddenly held new meaning. They weren't just cute little clay figures or a hobby to be dismissed. They were art, valuable and meaningful, capable of touching lives. I reached for my phone, ready to call Daniel and share the news, But I hesitated. The memory of his laughter at the gala, his dismissive attitude towards my work, made me pause. Did he deserve to be part of this moment? Instead, I found myself dialing Margaret's number. She answered on the second ring, her warm voice a balm to my still raw emotions. "Sophia, dear. I was hoping to hear from you. How are you holding up?" I took a deep breath. "Margaret, you won't believe what's happened. I got an email from Alexander Sterling." There was a moment of silence, then Margaret let out a delighted laugh. "Alexander Sterling? Oh, Sophia, that's wonderful. Tell me everything." As I relayed the contents of the email, Margaret's excitement was palpable. "This is huge, Sophia. Do you understand what this could mean for your career?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I think I'm starting to. But Margaret, I'm scared. What if it's too good to be true? What if I'm not ready for this?" "Nonsense," Margaret said firmly. "You are more than ready. Your work is exceptional, Sophia. I knew it the moment I saw it. Alexander Sterling has just confirmed what I already knew. You're a true artist, with a gift that deserves to be shared with the world." Her words bolstered my confidence. "Thank you, Margaret. For everything. I don't know where I'd be without your support." "You'd be exactly where you are," she replied. "Because your talent is your own. I just helped point it in the right direction. Now, let's talk about how we're going to respond to Mr. Sterling." For the next hour, Margaret and I discussed strategy. She advised me on how to approach the negotiation, how to value my work, and how to present myself professionally. By the time we hung up, I felt more prepared and confident than ever before. As I sat down to draft my response to Alexander Sterling, I felt a shift inside me. The Sophia who had shrunk under Cynthia's cruel words, who had accepted Daniel's dismissive attitude, was fading away. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who was ready to claim her place in the art world. I worked late into the night, carefully crafting my email to Sterling and preparing a portfolio of my available works. As I photographed each piece, I found myself rediscovering my love for them. Each curve, each texture told a story, my story. And now, thanks to Alexander Sterling, that story would be heard. It was past midnight when I finally sent off the email. Exhausted but exhilarated, I made my way back to the house. Daniel was asleep on the couch, the TV casting a blue glow over his face. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. We'd been drifting apart for so long, and this, my sudden success, would likely only widen the gap. But as I looked at him, I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need Cynthia's acceptance or anyone else's validation. My art spoke for itself, and there were people out there, important people in the art world, who saw its value. I covered Daniel with a blanket and went to bed, my mind swirling with possibilities. What would this mean for my future? How would my life change? As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone chiming. It was another email from Alexander Sterling, sent at 5 a.m. He'd received my portfolio and was, in his words, even more impressed than before. He proposed a figure for my existing collection that made my head spin. It was more money than I'd ever imagined my art could command. As for the commissioned piece, he left that open-ended, wanting to meet in person to discuss the concept. He was flying into Boston the following week and wanted to see my workshop, to understand the environment where my art came to life. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking as I reread the email. This was really happening. My art, my passion, the thing Cynthia had mocked and Daniel had dismissed, was about to become my career. Not just a career, a successful, lucrative career. I heard Daniel stirring in the living room, probably wondering why he'd spent the night on the couch. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell him about Sterling yet. This was my moment, my triumph, and I wanted to savor it a little longer before facing the inevitable questions and complications it would bring to our relationship. Instead, I got dressed and headed to my workshop. I had a commissioned piece to plan, a meeting with a prestigious art collector to prepare for, and a new chapter of my life to begin. As I opened the door to my creative space, breathing in the familiar scent of clay and possibility, I felt a smile spread across my face. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I could face them. Because now, finally, I understood the truth that had been there all along. I was an artist, my work had value, and I was ready to share it with the world. The week leading up to Alexander Sterling's visit was a whirlwind of activity. I spent every waking moment in my workshop, alternating between preparing my existing pieces for sale and sketching ideas for the commissioned work. The more I immersed myself in my art, the more confident I became. It was as if each brush stroke, each carefully molded curve, was stripping away years of self-doubt and replacing it with a solid core of self-belief. Daniel, for his part, seemed oblivious to the change in me. He'd made a few attempts at conversation, tried to apologize for the gala incident, but I'd been too focused, too driven to engage. I could sense his frustration growing, but for once, I couldn't bring myself to care. My art, my passion, my future, these were the things that mattered now. It was the night before Sterling's visit when everything came to a head. I was in the kitchen, making a quick sandwich before heading back to the workshop, when Daniel cornered me. "Sophia, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "You've been avoiding me for days. What's going on?" I took a bite of my sandwich, chewing slowly as I considered my response. "I've been working, Daniel. You know, on my little clay figures." He had the grace to look ashamed at that. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened at the gala. Mom went too far, and I should have stood up for you. But you can't just shut me out like this. Can't I?" I asked, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "You laughed, Daniel. You stood there and laughed while your mother humiliated me in front of everyone." "I said I was sorry," he exploded. "What more do you want from me? It was just a joke that went too far. Why can't you let it go?" I set down my plate, my appetite gone. "Because it wasn't just a joke, Daniel. It was a perfect example of how you and your mother have always seen me, always treated me. Like I'm some kind of charity case you took in, like my art is just a cute little hobby to keep the housewife busy." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times before. "That's not fair, Sophia. I've always supported your art." "Have you?" I challenged. "When was the last time you actually looked at one of my pieces? When was the last time you asked me about my work without that condescending little smile on your face?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, realizing he had no answer. In that moment of silence, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Sterling, confirming the details of tomorrow's meeting. As I quickly typed a response, I could feel Daniel's eyes on me. "Who's that?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "You've been glued to your phone all week. Is there someone else?" I couldn't help it, I laughed. The idea was so absurd, so far from the truth, that it struck me as hilarious. "No, Daniel, there's no one else. But there is something I need to tell you." Taking a deep breath, I told him everything, about Margaret's gallery offer, about Alexander Sterling's email, about the sale of my collection and the commissioned piece. As I spoke, I watched the emotions play across his face, disbelief, shock, and finally, a dawning realization. "So you're saying, you're going to be rich?" he asked, his voice small. I shook my head, disappointed but not surprised that this was his takeaway. "I'm saying I'm going to be recognized, Daniel. I'm saying my art, the work you and your mother have dismissed for years, is valuable. I'm saying I'm an artist, a real one, and it's time you and everyone else understood that." The next morning, I was up before dawn, too wired with nervous energy to sleep. I was in my workshop, making some final adjustments to the display of my pieces, when I heard a car pull up. My heart leaped into my throat. Sterling was early. But when I stepped outside, it wasn't Sterling's sleek town car I saw. It was Cynthia's Mercedes, with Daniel in the passenger seat. My stomach dropped. Of course, he'd called his mother. Of course, they'd try to insert themselves into this moment. Cynthia emerged from the car, her face a mask of polite interest that didn't quite hide the calculating look in her eyes. "Sophia, darling," she cooed, air-kissing my cheeks. "Daniel told me the wonderful news. An art collector How exciting. I stiffened, stepping back from her embrace. Yes, it is exciting. But I'm not sure why you're here, Cynthia. This is a private meeting. Her smile faltered for just a moment before returning, brittle and forced. Well, we're family, aren't we? I thought you might appreciate some support. And of course, I have some experience with these sorts of negotiations. I'd be happy to help. Before I could respond, another car pulled up. This one the town car I'd been expecting. Alexander Sterling stepped out, every bit the distinguished art collector in his tailored suit and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked from me to Cynthia and Daniel, one eyebrow raised in question. Mr. Sterling, I said, stepping forward to shake his hand. It's an honor to meet you. I apologize for the unexpected guests. My mother-in-law and husband decided to stop by. I put just enough emphasis on unexpected to make it clear they weren't part of the plan. Sterling nodded, his keen eyes taking in the situation. A pleasure, I'm sure. But I believe we had arranged for a private meeting, Mrs. Chen. I'm quite interested in seeing your workspace, undisturbed. I could feel Cynthia bristling behind me, not used to being dismissed so easily. Now see here, she started, but Sterling cut her off with a polite but firm gesture. Madam, I'm sure you mean well, but I make it a point to interact directly with the artists I'm interested in. It's part of my process. Now, if you'll excuse us. With that, he guided me towards my workshop, leaving Cynthia and Daniel standing open-mouthed in the driveway. As we entered my creative space, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was my domain, where I was most comfortable, most myself. Sterling moved through the workshop slowly, examining each piece with careful consideration. He asked questions, thoughtful, incisive questions that showed he truly understood and appreciated my work. As we talked, I felt my confidence growing. This man, this respected figure in the art world, saw value in what I created. After nearly 2 hours, Sterling finally turned to me with a smile. Mrs. Chen, Sophia, I must say, seeing your work in person has only reinforced my initial impression. You have a unique voice, a perspective that I believe will resonate strongly in the current art market. He pulled out a contract from his briefcase. I'm prepared to make an offer for your entire collection, as well as the commissioned piece we discussed. I think you'll find the terms more than fair. As I looked over the contract, my eyes widened. The figure was even higher than what he'd initially proposed in his email. It was the kind of money that could change my life, that could allow me to pursue my art full-time without worry. This is very generous, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Sterling nodded. It's what your work is worth, Sophia. Now, shall we discuss the commissioned piece? For the next hour, we talked concepts and ideas, with Sterling giving me almost complete creative freedom. By the time he left, I not only had a signed contract but a clear vision for my next major work. As I walked him back to his car, I saw that Cynthia and Daniel were still there, waiting. Sterling nodded politely to them before turning to me one last time. I look forward to seeing what you create, Sophia. I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you. As his car pulled away, I turned to face my husband and mother-in-law. The looks on their faces were a mixture of shock, confusion, and in Cynthia's case, a growing calculation. Well, Cynthia said, her voice syrupy sweet, it seems we underestimated your little hobby, didn't we? Sophia, darling, you simply must tell us all about it. Perhaps over dinner at the club. I looked at her, then at Daniel, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Cynthia, always ready to align herself with success, no matter how recently she'd scorned it. Daniel, wide-eyed and uncertain, realizing too late the talent he'd dismissed for so long. In that moment, I made a decision. Actually, Cynthia, I'm afraid I'll be quite busy for the foreseeable future. I have a commissioned piece to work on, and then there's the gallery showing to prepare for. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll read all about it in the papers. With that, I turned and walked back to my workshop, my steps light, my heart soaring. The tables had turned, yes, but more than that, I had turned them. With my art, my passion, my unwavering belief in myself. And as I picked up my tools, ready to begin work on my next creation, I knew that this was only the beginning. The best was yet to come. The weeks following Alexander Sterling's visit were a whirlwind of activity and change. I threw myself into my work with a passion and focus I'd never experienced before. The commissioned piece for Sterling became my obsession, a representation of everything I'd been through and everything I hoped to become. As I worked, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. Each curve of clay, each carefully sculpted detail, seemed to tell a part of my story. The piece was evolving into something more than just a sculpture. It was becoming a testament to resilience, to the power of believing in oneself despite all odds. While I worked, my relationship with Daniel continued to deteriorate. He oscillated between attempts at reconciliation and bouts of resentment, clearly struggling to come to terms with my newfound success and independence. I found I had little patience for his mood swings. The woman who had once bent over backwards to please him, to fit into his world, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. It was on a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled outside my workshop window, that I finally finished Sterling's commission. I stepped back, surveying the piece with a critical eye. It was a series of interconnected human figures, each emerging from a shapeless mass of clay, reaching towards the sky in a gesture of triumph and liberation. The figures started small and grew larger, more defined, more confident as they progressed. It was my journey, rendered in clay and bronze. As I stood there, lost in contemplation of my work, I heard a knock at the door. It was Daniel. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I nodded, curious about what had brought him to my sanctuary. He entered slowly, his eyes widening as he took in the commissioned piece. "Wow," he breathed, circling the sculpture. "Sophia, this is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." "Thank you," I said simply, watching him closely. He turned to me, his face a mask of regret and shame. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry I never saw it before. Your talent, your passion. I was blind to it for so long." I felt a twinge in my heart, an echo of the love we'd once shared. But it wasn't enough. "Not anymore. I appreciate that, Daniel," I said softly. "But I think we both know it's too late." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I know. I wanted you to know that I see it now. And I'm proud of you. Even if I don't get to be part of it anymore." As he left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but it was closure. A chapter of my life was ending, but a new one was just beginning. The next day, I carefully packed up the commissioned piece and several others for transport. Sterling had arranged for them to be moved to his gallery in New York, where my first solo exhibition would be held. As I watched the movers carefully load my sculptures into their truck, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was it, my debut on the national art scene. The exhibition opening was a blur of faces, handshakes, and congratulations. I stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by my work, feeling simultaneously exposed and empowered. Sterling beamed with pride as he introduced me to critics, collectors, and fellow artists. The response to my work was overwhelming. People seemed genuinely moved by my sculptures, finding meaning in them that sometimes even I hadn't consciously intended. As the night wore on, I found myself in conversation with a young woman, her eyes bright with admiration. "Your work is amazing," she gushed. "The way you capture emotion in clay, it's inspiring. I'm an aspiring sculptor myself, but I've been doubting whether I should pursue it seriously. Seeing your exhibition, it's given me hope." Her words hit me hard, reminding me of my own journey, my own doubts. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Never give up on your passion," I told her earnestly. "It won't always be easy, and there will be people who don't understand or support you. But if it's truly what you love, it's worth fighting for. Believe in yourself, in your art. That's the most important thing." As she walked away, visibly moved by our interaction, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Margaret, her face wreathed in smiles. "You've done it, my dear," she said, pulling me into a warm hug. "I knew you had it in you." I hugged her back, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." She pulled back, shaking her head. "No, Sophia. You did this. All I did was give you a little push. The talent, the determination, that was all you. As the exhibition came to a close, Sterling approached me with a group of important-looking individuals. "Sophia," he said, his voice brimming with excitement, "I'd like you to meet some people. They're very interested in commissioning pieces for their own collections." And just like that, my career exploded. Over the next few months, I found myself fielding commission requests from around the world. My sculptures were featured in prestigious galleries, my name mentioned in the same breath as artists I'd once only dreamed of emulating. But with success came new challenges. The pressure to create, to constantly innovate, was intense. There were nights when I found myself staring at a lump of clay, paralyzed by the fear that I'd run out of ideas, that I couldn't live up to the expectations now placed on me. In those moments, I'd think back to the gala, to Cynthia's mocking words and the laughter of the crowd. I'd remember the feeling of being small, of being dismissed. And then I'd think of the young aspiring sculptor at my exhibition, of the people who wrote to me saying my work had touched them deeply. I'd think of Margaret's unwavering belief in me, of Sterling's recognition of my talent. And I'd pick up my tools and start again. As my professional life flourished, my personal life underwent its own transformation. Daniel and I finalized our divorce, a process that was painful but ultimately liberating. I moved out of our shared home and into a loft in the city, converting half the space into a studio where I could work whenever inspiration struck. Cynthia, true to form, attempted to reinsert herself into my life as my fame grew. She'd call or show up unannounced, full of compliments and suggestions for how I could capitalize on my success. Each time, I politely but firmly rebuffed her attempts. The approval I'd once desperately sought from her now meant nothing to me. Instead, I found myself surrounded by a new circle of friends and supporters. Fellow artists who understood the drive to create, collectors who appreciated the emotion and skill in my work, and ordinary people who connected with the stories my sculptures told. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and understood. 1 year after my New York debut, I stood in my studio, putting the finishing touches on my latest piece. It was a commission for a public park, my first large-scale outdoor sculpture. As I worked, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the little clay figurines I used to make, the ones Cynthia had mocked and Daniel had dismissed. I thought about the nights I'd spent doubting myself, wondering if I was foolish to pursue my passion. I thought about the gala, the humiliation that had nearly broken me, but had instead become the catalyst for my transformation. As I stepped back to survey my work, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The sculpture before me was more than just clay and metal, it was a piece of my soul, a testament to the power of resilience and self-belief. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how my career might evolve, I had found my true path. I was an artist, not because of the accolades or the success, but because creating was as essential to me as breathing. The sun was setting outside my studio window, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As I cleaned my tools and prepared to call it a day, I felt a smile spread across my face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ideas, new opportunities to grow and create. And I was ready for all of it. Because this wasn't just a new chapter in my life, it was the story I was always meant to tell, sculpted in clay and bronze, a testament to the power of art and the strength of the human spirit. As I turned off the lights in my studio, I paused for a moment, taking in the silhouettes of my creations in the fading light. Each piece held a part of me, a part of my journey. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew that the best was yet to come. My story, like my art, was still unfolding, one sculpture at a time.